Hi students, today we'll be looking at the nervous system itself. So we'll be breaking it up into three different segments for the video. The first one we'll be going through the central nervous system, that is the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, which is the PNS. And secondly, the second part of the video will be going through the neuronal structure, which are the structure of your nerves. Basically, we'll be focusing on the motor neuron itself along with neuronal synapses that happens. And last but not least, we'll be looking at how nerve impulses are transmitted along with you have got your reflex impulse and your voluntary impulses. Okay, so let's start. The nervous system itself, when we talk about the central nervous system, we're talking about the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. Okay, so your nervous system is then split up into two different sections, as you can see here. So the first part is whereby it has got the central nervous system. So central nervous system, as the name suggests, it is the central level of our body, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so we know that the brain and spinal cord, they are incredibly important because perhaps we know someone or we have watched shows before whereby the brain, aneurysm in the brain or a problem in the brain affects different parts of the body. So likewise, the spinal cord, if there is an issue with the spinal cord, it will also affect different parts of the body, even paralysis. Okay, so the brain and the spinal cord, they communicate between other parts of the body, which is called the peripheral nervous system. So peripheral, the periphery of the nervous system, will consist of your cranial nerves itself and your sense organs. So we have got three main neurons here that consist in the peripheral nervous system. So the sensory neuron is the one that is used to sense things. So for example, if you touch something hot, the heat of the object is being transmitted by the sensory neuron. So this sensory neuron will then relay that information, okay, to the spinal cord region, and of course you will jerk your hand away from the hot object itself, and that motion is by your muscles, which is due to your motor neuron. Okay, so back to your brain and spinal cord. So your brain and spinal cord itself has these two matter, okay, which is called gray matter and white matter. So gray matter and white matter, these are substances that consist in the brain and the spinal cord. So why gray and white is simply because of the color that they give off. So gray color in the parts of the brain and the spinal cord is due to the presence of the cell bodies. So when all the cell bodies of the spinal cord or the brain itself aggregate together, they give off this color that looks as though it is slightly grayish. Okay, white matter is due to the nerve fibers that aggregate together. So nerve fibers, typically they will have a fatty layer, and the fat layers are the ones that give it that white color thing. Okay, so likewise, earlier on I mentioned your nervous system receives the nerve impulses from the receptors. So when you touch something hot, that is your heat receptor. So the heat receptor will then transmit the information to your sensory neuron, and then sensory neuron will transmit that information to your muscle. So your muscle, your hand, is the effector. So the effector will move away, and that is the response that you get. Okay, so in a way, it helps to regulate and coordinate the body activities as per the environmental cues or the environmental things that you have around you. Okay, so moving down here, this is where we look at the white matter and the gray matter. Okay, so what you realize is that for the spinal cord, the gray matter is in the central region, so which means the cell bodies are in the central region here, and the nerve bodies, okay, or the nerve fibers are at the outer region. Whereas it is the opposite in the brain. You have got your gray matter that is on the outside, where your cell bodies are, and the nerve fibers will be located on the inside, which is the white matter. Okay, so you have got your spinal nerve itself. So all these receptors will be coming in. So you do recognize some of the terms here, such as your sensory neuron. Okay, let me see whether I can get the... Okay, so you have got your sensory neuron here, okay, which we talk about. We also have your effector, which is the muscle, and that will produce a response, which is the motor neuron. okay, due to the motor neuron itself. So the sensory neurons will all come in together, they will all aggregate, because it is impossible that it is only one sensory neuron that is giving the sensation or the information. So the sensory neurons will all come together through this region, which is the dorsal root. Okay, so as they come together here, you will have this region whereby all the cell bodies of the sensory neuron aggregate together, resulting in a slight little bulge. Okay, and this slight little bulging region is what we call the dorsal root ganglion over here. So all these sensory neurons, it will move into the gray matter of the spinal cord, and it will synapse. Synapse means it sort of meet with the relay neuron. So this is your intermediate neuron, which acts, you know, like when you run a relay, a race relay, you pass the baton on to somebody else. So in the same way, it passes the information or relay the information from the sensory neuron to your motor neuron. Okay, so relay neuron is being here. Thereafter, your relay neuron will pass the information, or rather synapse, onto your motor neuron at this region. So from your motor neurons will then leave the spinal cord via your ventral root. So as they leave via the ventral root, the motor neurons will then synapse onto the effector to elicit a response. Okay, so let me just type that down so that you are clearer about it. So your motor neuron so elicit a response means to achieve a response or to produce a response there. Okay, so next part of the video we'll be looking at the structure of the neuron itself, followed by the nerve impulses that goes through. Thank you for watching the first part.